Hey everyone, and welcome back to Coffeesodes. This is episode number 37.
37.
Oh, wow. Today we're going to do a deep dive into some really interesting research on Manuka honey
Oh, very cool.
and its potential effects on breast cancer.
Yeah.
If you want to check out the study itself, we have a link down in the episode description.
Great.
And as always, a quick disclaimer that we're not medical professionals.
Of course.
So none of this is a substitute for advice from your doctor.
Always good to emphasize that. What I find fascinating is that we're looking at Manuka honey.
Yeah.
Not just as something delicious, but potentially as a tool against a disease.
Right.
That affects so many people globally.
Yeah, it's a pretty big shift of perspective.
Yeah.
And a great place to start, I think. Breast cancer is a huge global health issue.
Right.
One of the biggest challenges is treatment resistance, especially to commonly used drugs like tamoxifen.
Right.
So finding new approaches is absolutely crucial.
Right. And that's what makes this research on Manuka honey so compelling.
Yeah.
It's not just any honey. Manuka honey has this long history of use in traditional medicine,
Right.
particularly for wound healing.
Yeah.
And now science is starting to understand why. It has a unique composition
Yeah.
with compounds like methylgaloxol
Okay.
and flavonoids,
Interesting.
which seem to give it these remarkable properties.
Okay, so let's get into the specifics of this study.
Yeah.
They started by testing Manuka honey against breast cancer cells
Yeah.
in the lab.
Right.
The results were pretty striking. What stood out to you?
Well, they found that Manuka honey inhibited the growth of ER-positive breast cancer cells, and it did so in a dose-dependent manner,
Dose-dependent.
meaning the higher the concentration of honey, the stronger the effect on slowing down those cancer cells.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a pretty clear signal, right?
Okay.
But they also found something interesting when they looked at triple-negative breast cancer cells.
Exactly. The effect wasn't as pronounced with the triple-negative cells. So it raises the question of whether Manuka honey might be more effective against certain subtypes of breast cancer, which is something researchers will need to dig into further.
Absolutely. And here's where it gets really intriguing, at least for me. They found that Manuka honey actually seemed to boost the effectiveness of tamoxifen,
Yes.
that drug we talked about earlier.
Right.
Considering how many people struggle with tamoxifen resistance, this potential synergy is kind of a big deal.
Yeah.
Can you give us a quick breakdown of how tamoxifen actually works?
Sure. In simple terms, some breast cancers are fueled by estrogen.
Okay.
Tamoxifen blocks estrogen from binding to those cancer cells,
Interesting.
essentially cutting off their fuel supply and slowing down or stopping tumor growth. But as you mentioned, the problem is that sometimes those cancer cells figure out ways to become resistant to tamoxifen.
Right.
And that's where the potential role of Manuka honey becomes really interesting.
Yeah, it's like Manuka honey is stepping in to say, hey, tamoxifen, need a hand with that.
Uh-huh.
But it's not just about slowing down growth, right? This study found that Manuka honey might actually be triggering something called apoptosis in those breast cancer cells.
That's right. Apoptosis is basically programmed cell death.
Oh,
It's like the cell receives a signal to self-destruct
yeah.
in a controlled way, which is a really important process for keeping cancer cells in check. What I found fascinating was that the researchers saw evidence of this apoptosis through something called PRP cleavage,
Interesting.
which is a very specific marker.
Okay.
And to really isolate the effects, they compared Manuka honey to regular sugar and even mesquite honey. And neither of those induced significant apoptosis. It really highlights the unique activity of Manuka honey.
Okay, so we've got Manuka honey seemingly slowing down growth
Yeah.
and maybe even triggering cell death. But what's the mechanism behind all this? The study dug into some of the molecular pathways involved.
Right. They looked at two key pathways, AMPK
Okay.
and AKTMTR. These pathways play a crucial role in all sorts of cellular processes like growth, metabolism, and survival.
Right.
And what's interesting is that Manuka honey seems to be modulating these pathways in a way that favors tumor suppression.
So it's almost like Manuka honey is going in and flipping certain switches within the cells to make them less hospitable to cancer.
That's a good way to put it. It's not just directly killing the cancer cells, but potentially disrupting the very processes that allow them to grow and thrive. And that's just what we're seeing with those two pathways. There might be others involved as well.
Now, we've talked a lot about what's happening at the cellular level,
Right.
but the study also took things a step further, right? They actually looked at Manuka honey's effects in living organisms,
Yes.
not just cells in a dish.
They moved on to what we call in vivo studies using mice with human breast cancer tumors.
Okay.
And what they found was remarkable. Oral administration of Manuka honey actually led to a significant reduction in tumor growth
Wait, hold on. By how much did it slow down tumor growth?
by a whopping 84%.
Wow, 84%.
It's really quite impressive.
That's a huge reduction.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder if what we're seeing in the lab is actually translating into real tangible effects in a more complex biological system.
And the exciting thing is that this isn't just a one-off finding. There's a growing body of research exploring Manuka honey's potential anti-tumor effects in other types of cancer as well, like melanoma.
Oh,
And they've been looking at different methods of administration, like giving it orally versus intravenously, which suggests that there's a lot of interest in figuring out how to best utilize its properties.
this is all really promising. But I know one of the first questions that pops into people's minds when they hear about something like this is it safe?
Of course, safety is paramount.
Yeah.
And the good news is that so far the research hasn't shown any major side effects at the doses they've used in these studies. However, it's important to remember that more research is needed to really understand the long-term safety profile, especially if it were to be used as a regular part of cancer treatment.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
We don't want to get ahead of ourselves. But I have to say, this is already pretty mind-blowing stuff. Who knew that something as simple as honey could have this kind of potential in the fight against cancer?
It's a great reminder that sometimes the most powerful solutions are found in nature. But before we jump into part 2, where we'll delve even deeper into the implications of this research, let's take a quick pause.
Okay, sounds good.
What are your initial thoughts on what we've discussed so far?
Yeah.
What's sticking with you?
Yeah.
Grab another cup of coffee, think it over, and we'll be right back to continue our Manuka honey deep dive.
Sounds great.
Welcome back to part 2 of our deep dive into the fascinating world of Manuka honey
Yeah.
and its potential role in the fight against breast cancer. Let's pick up right where we left off.
All right, so we've seen Manuka honey in action
Yeah.
against those cancer cells in a dish.
Right.
And we even talked about those impressive results in mice. But I think the big question on everyone's mind is, how does all of this relate to us, to humans?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It's important to remember that while these preclinical studies,
Right.
the ones in the lab and with animals, are incredibly promising, they don't automatically guarantee success in humans. There's still a lot we need to learn.
So what's the next step then? How do we bridge that gap and figure out if Manuka honey can actually deliver on its promise for people dealing with breast cancer?
Well, the next step is to move into clinical trials
Okay.
with human participants.
Right.
These trials are carefully designed to determine things like the optimal dosages for different people, the long-term safety,
Okay.
and of course, whether Manuka honey truly lives up to its potential in treating breast cancer in humans.
So basically taking everything we've learned so far and putting it to the test in the real world.
Exactly.
It makes sense, but I imagine those trials can get pretty complex.
Absolutely. They have to consider so many factors like the stage of cancer, the overall health of each individual patient, and potential interactions with other treatments someone might be receiving. It's a complex puzzle.
Right.
But these initial findings give us a solid foundation to build on.
Speaking of building on what we know,
Yeah.
I'm curious to dig a little deeper into how Manuka honey might actually be attacking those cancer cells.
Yeah.
You mentioned those pathways earlier,
Right.
AMPK and AKTMTOR.
Right.
What's the significance of those?
Right. Those pathways are essentially key players in how cells function, controlling things like growth metabolism and survival. And what's fascinating is that Manuka honey seems to be influencing these pathways in a way that favors tumor suppression, making it harder for the cancer cells to thrive.
So it's not just a brute force attack. It's more like Manuka honey is a skilled strategist, targeting those specific pathways to disrupt the cancer cell's operations.
That's a great analogy. It really highlights the complexity of these interactions.
Yeah.
And it's not just limited to those two pathways either.
Yeah.
The study also found that Manuka honey inhibits the phosphorylation of STAT3, which is another molecule that plays a significant role in cancer development and progression. So it seems to be a multi-pronged attack.
Wow.
which is really encouraging.
And then there's the potential synergy with tamoxifen, right?
Yeah.
If Manuka honey can actually enhance the effectiveness of a drug that's already widely used, it could be a game changer for so many people,
Right.
especially those who are facing tamoxifen resistance.
Imagine the possibilities. Combining Manuka honey with existing therapies could open up a whole new world of treatment options, potentially leading to more effective regimens and better outcomes. For countless individuals, it's definitely something worth exploring further.
It's definitely exciting to think about, but I think it's important to stay grounded in the science as well.
Right.
We've covered a lot of promising findings, but more research is crucial to really confirm these findings and explore the full extent of Manuka honey's therapeutic potential. We're still in the early stages of discovery here.
Exactly. We're just scratching the surface.
Yeah.
Think about it. Manuka honey has been used for centuries in traditional medicine,
Right?
but it's only recently that modern science has started to unravel its secrets. There's still so much to learn.
It makes you wonder what other natural compounds are out there just waiting to be discovered and harnessed
Right.
for their medicinal benefits.
Absolutely. It's a reminder that nature holds a treasure trove
Yeah.
of potential remedies, and with continued research, we may uncover even more natural weapons in the fight against diseases like cancer.
Now, before we move on to part 3,
Okay.
where we'll shift gears a bit and consider the broader implications of this research, including the potential role of Manuka honey in cancer prevention, I want to pause and give you a moment to reflect.
Okay.
What are your initial thoughts on Manuka honey as a potential cancer treatment? And how do you think this research could shape the future of cancer care? Take a moment, process what we've discussed, and we'll be back in a flash to continue our Manuka honey exploration. And we're back for the final part of our Manuka honey deep dive. So far, we've been focusing on its potential in treating breast cancer.
Right.
But I'm curious to shift gears a bit. Could Manuka honey also play a role in preventing cancer in the first place?
That's a question that has a lot of researchers excited right now.
Yeah.
While the research is still in its early stages, the idea that something as natural and accessible as Manuka honey could help prevent cancer is really intriguing.
It taps into that whole food is medicine concept, doesn't it?
It does.
But before we get carried away,
Uh.
what does the science actually say about Manuka honey and cancer prevention?
Well, it's important to note that the study we've been discussing primarily focused on treatment,
Right.
not prevention.
Okay.
But some of the findings, like Manuka honey's ability to inhibit cancer cell proliferation, that's the rapid growth of cancer cells,
Right.
and to induce apoptosis,
Yeah.
or program cell death, hint that it might have some preventative potential as well.
So it's like Manuka honey could be working on two fronts, stopping cancer if it develops and potentially preventing it from developing in the first place. That's a pretty powerful 1-2 punch.
Exactly. If you think about it, we know that chronic inflammation in the body can actually contribute to the development of cancer.
Right.
And Manuka honey has well-documented anti-inflammatory properties.
Okay.
So it's possible that by reducing inflammation, Manuka honey could help lower the overall risk of cancer.
That makes a lot of sense. But like you said, more research is needed to really explore this avenue specifically. What kind of studies would help us understand the preventative potential of Manuka honey?
Ideally, we need large-scale, long-term studies that track the effects of regular Manuka honey consumption on cancer incidence in humans. And those studies would need to be carefully controlled, taking into account other lifestyle factors and genetic predispositions that can influence cancer risk.
If those studies do end up supporting Manuka honey's preventative potential, it could have huge implications for public health, couldn't it?
Absolutely. Imagine a world where something as simple as incorporating Manuka honey into your diet could significantly reduce your risk of developing cancer.
Wow.
It's a tantalizing possibility, but we need that scientific evidence to confirm it.
It's a good reminder that sometimes the most powerful solutions come from the most unexpected places.
Yeah.
So as we wrap up our Manuka honey deep dive, what are the key takeaways you want our listeners to walk away with?
Well, first and foremost, the research on Manuka honey and cancer is incredibly promising, but it's still early.
Right.
We need more studies, especially with human participants, to confirm these findings and explore the full potential of Manuka honey in both treating and possibly preventing breast cancer.
And second, we're starting to understand that Manuka honey's unique composition, with those compounds like methylglycol and flavonoids, seems to be driving its anti-cancer activity. It's not just a sweet treat, there's real science behind it.
Right, and it's not just about directly killing cancer cells. It seems to be working on multiple levels, disrupting the pathways that allow cancer cells to grow and spread, and potentially even reducing inflammation in the body, which can contribute to cancer development.
And I think it's also important to emphasize that while initial safety data is encouraging, more research is needed to fully understand the long-term effects of regular Manuka honey consumption.
Absolutely. We need to be cautious and let the science guide us. But overall, this research is incredibly exciting. It opens up a whole new avenue for exploring natural compounds like Manuka honey in the fight against cancer.
It's a great reminder that nature holds so much potential for healing, and that we're only just beginning to tap into it.
Yeah.
And that wraps up our Manuka honey deep dive. We hope you found this exploration as fascinating as we did. If you'd like to delve deeper into the study we've been discussing, we've included the full citation in the episode description.
And as always, stay curious, keep learning, and keep those coffee cups full. Until next time, happy exploring.